Welcome to my channel. I hope you find this story entertaining. Let's start. The bell signaled the conclusion of another school day. I collected my papers, nodding farewell to the remaining students as they left the classroom. After 20 years of teaching high school English, the routine had never altered, but recently, this routine had become a lifeline, the only stability in a world that seemed increasingly unstable. I took the familiar route home to the modest two-story house, a place that used to be filled with dreams and warmth, but now it seemed like a facade, much like my marriage to Sylvia. Even saying her name left a sour taste in my mouth. We had grown apart, becoming two strangers living together. Her aspirations had surpassed our modest lifestyle, while I was satisfied with what we had built. Or at least I believed so. Entering the quiet house, I noticed Sylvia's purse on the counter. She must be upstairs. I loosened my tie and headed to the kitchen for a desperately needed drink. That's when I noticed a crumpled receipt sticking out of her purse. Normally I wouldn't snoop, but an instinct made me pick it up. As I flattened the receipt, my heart dropped. The Regal Hotel, a luxury suite booked by Alejandro Meyer. Alejandro, that name resonated in my mind. He was the charming architect who had been visiting Sylvia recently. I had noticed how she looked at him but dismissed it as harmless admiration. Clearly, I was mistaken. I gripped the receipt, my knuckles turning white. Just then, Sylvia's voice echoed as the front door opened. "Gordon, you're home early." I turned to face her as she entered the kitchen. She looked stunning, her dark hair cascading around her shoulders, but now all I could see was betrayal. "What's this?" I asked, my voice more stable than I felt. Sylvia's eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "You went through my things," she demanded. "Answer the question, Sylvia," I insisted. She laughed, a sound that pierced me like shattered glass. "Oh, darling, are you jealous?" I stared at her, disbelief flooding me. This wasn't the woman I had married. This person before me was a stranger, harsh and merciless. "Jealous," I repeated, my tone unemotional. Sylvia approached with a predatory spark in her eyes. "You should be. Alejandro knows how to treat a woman. He doesn't bore her with discussions about lesson plans and parent-teacher meetings." "So you admit it? You're having an affair?" I questioned. She shrugged, reaching for the receipt, but I pulled it back, and her eyes flashed with irritation. "What did you expect, Gordon? Look at you, a high school teacher with unrealistic aspirations. Alejandro is ambitious. He can provide the life I desire," she declared, each word cutting deeply, yet I refused to let her see my pain. "And what life is that? Sylvia? One founded on falsehoods and dishonesty." She laughed again, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, please, spare me your moral superiority. You're just upset because you're no longer satisfying." I stepped back, suddenly viewing our entire marriage under a new light. All the late nights, every secretive call, it all made sense now. "How long?" I asked, my voice soft. Sylvia smirked, evidently relishing my distress. "Long enough. And tonight, I'm seeing him again. He's booked the penthouse suite. Don't wait up, darling. I'll be too occupied being treated like royalty." She turned to leave, but I grasped her arm. "Sylvia, consider what you're doing. We can sort this out," I pleaded. She jerked her arm away, her gaze icy. "Sort what out? There's nothing left, Gordon. You're pathetic, holding on to this sham of a marriage. I want more, and Alejandro can provide it." I watched her walk away, my world disintegrating around me. The front door slammed, and I was left alone in the silence of our once joyful home. Hours passed, and I sat in the dark, the receipt still in my grasp. As the night progressed, my shock transformed into anger, then into a cold, calculating fury. Sylvia had made her decision. Now it was my turn. I grabbed my keys and wallet, leaving behind the house that no longer felt like mine. I spent the night in my car, parked at the school, my mind teeming with plans. Sylvia wanted to play games? Fine, but she would soon discover that I was no pushover. As dawn broke, I made my decision. Sylvia had destroyed our life together, and now I would demolish her false impressions of grandeur, doing so mercilessly. The bank opened at 9 a.m., sharp. I was the first customer in, my determination solidified by a night without sleep, spent planning. "Good morning, Mr. Mayo," the teller greeted me cheerfully. "How can I assist you today?" I put on a forced smile. "I need to adjust some details on my accounts." 30 minutes later, I exited the bank, our joint account emptied and Sylvia's credit cards canceled. It was astonishing how swiftly one could dismantle a life that took decades to build. Next stop was the lawyer's office. I'd called in a favor from an old friend who was indebted to me. By noon, I had the divorce papers ready, the ink still fresh on the signature line. Back at the house, I collected a few essentials: clothes, important papers, and the woodworking tools that had been my refuge over the years. While packing, my gaze landed on our wedding photo. Sylvia's smile, once so enchanting, now seemed like a facade masking the deceit that had always been present underneath. I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table with a note: Queen of the streets, now revel in your pauper's palace. Short, harsh, and direct, just like her betrayal. As I loaded my car, Mrs. Henderson from next door called out, "Everything all right, Gordon?" Sylvia left in quite a rush last night. I managed to smile. "Just fine, Mrs. Henderson. Sylvia's visiting a friend. I'm heading out for a bit myself." The lie came easily. Let Sylvia face the consequences when she returned. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, checking in under an assumed name. Settling into the sparse room, my phone rang. Sylvia's name displayed. I declined the call, a feeling of satisfaction washing over me. Hours passed, my phone lighting up with calls, texts, and voicemails. I ignored them all, picturing Sylvia's panic as she uncovered her new reality. Finally, curiosity prevailed, and I listened to the first voicemail. "Gordon, what the hell have you done?" Sylvia's voice was shrill, frantic. "The cards aren't working. The accounts are empty. Call me back immediately." I deleted it without hesitation. The next message played automatically. "This isn't funny, Gordon. You can't do this to me. I'll tell everyone." "What a controlling monster you are. You'll regret this." Her threats left me unfazed. She had already taken everything important. What more could she possibly do? The final message was different. Alejandro's smooth voice filled the room. "Gordon, it's Alejandro. Look, I know you're upset, but let's handle this like adults. Call me back, and we can talk this through." I laughed bitterly. Civilly, as if there was anything civil about stealing another man's wife. I deleted all the messages, then blocked both their numbers, letting them stew in their mess. As night fell, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the blank TV screen. The initial rush of revenge was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache, but I pushed it aside. This was just the beginning. Sylvia and Alejandro thought they had fooled me, but they would soon learn I was capable of much more than they had ever imagined. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys as I started planning the next stage of my retaliation. Sylvia had connections in this town, friends in high places, but I possessed something far more valuable: 20 years of quiet observation and a strategic mind that no one had ever acknowledged. By dawn, I had a detailed plan. It wasn't enough to just walk away, no. I would systematically dismantle their world, piece by piece, just as they had shattered mine. The next few weeks were a blur of calculated actions and subtle manipulations. At work, I maintained the facade of the devoted teacher, but in the evenings I set my plans into motion, starting subtly: a concerned comment to a mutual friend over coffee. "I'm worried about Sylvia," I confided softly. "She's been under so much stress lately." Acting unpredictably, Sarah, always curious about the latest rumors, leaned in. "Oh? How so?" I sighed, portraying the image of a worried husband. Mood swings, impulsive actions. I'm trying to be supportive, but... I let my voice trail off, allowing her imagination to fill in the gaps. Sarah patted my hand. "Poor dear, both of you. I'll keep an eye on her. Make sure she's okay." I nodded, subtly concealing my pleasure. The seed was sown. At school, I overheard two teachers discussing local architects for a home renovation. "What about Alejandro Mir?" one inquired. "I've heard good things." I couldn't resist. "Be cautious with that one," I advised, keeping my tone light. "I've heard he tends to get too involved with his clients, especially the married ones." Their eyes widened, and I knew the rumor would spread rapidly. Weeks passed, and I observed as my carefully laid whispers took effect. Sylvia, once the favorite of our social circle, found herself increasingly shunned. Invitations ceased, friends grew distant, and Alejandro's once stellar reputation began to decline. I encountered Sylvia at the grocery store. Her cart was loaded with cheap wine and microwave meals. She looked worn, her stylish clothes crumpled. "Gordon," she hissed, seizing my arm. "What have you been spreading about me?" I calmly removed her hand, my expression one of bewilderment. "I haven't said a word, Sylvia. Are you feeling okay? You seem unwell." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't pretend innocence. My friends are avoiding me. Alejandro's clients are canceling. This is your doing." I shrugged, maintaining a composed tone. Sounds like you're having a tough time. Maybe you should speak with someone about that paranoia. She opened her mouth to respond, but I had already turned, leaving her seething by the frozen foods. The final strike came from an unexpected source. Jocelyn, a local influencer and one of Sylvia's closest allies, approached me after a school event. "Gordon, can we talk?" Her voice was low, her eyes scanning nervously. I nodded, guiding her to a secluded spot. "What's on your mind, Jocelyn?" She bit her lip. "It's about Sylvia. I'm worried. She's been saying alarming things about you." I raised an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. "Oh," Jocelyn looked uneasy. "She's talking about exposing you, claiming you're abusive, controlling. But Gordon, I've known you both for years. It doesn't match up." I sighed deeply. "Jocelyn, I appreciate your concern. Sylvia's been struggling a lot lately. I'm afraid she's not thinking clearly, so it's not true." I met her gaze directly. "What do you think?" She considered for a moment, then nodded. "I thought as much. Don't worry, Gordon. I won't let her spread these falsehoods." As Jocelyn walked away, I allowed a slight smile. Sylvia's last desperate maneuver to reverse the situation had spectacularly failed. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand. My phone buzzed with a news alert. A local gossip column had published an article about a scandalous affair between a renowned architect and a married woman. No names were specified, but the insinuations were obvious. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Checkmate, my dear. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot, but as I watched Sylvia and Alejandro's meticulously crafted world collapse, I experienced a wave of triumph. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a simple, naive teacher. Now, they were discovering just how mistaken they were. I was grading papers at my desk when my phone buzzed with another notification, a post from Jocelyn, Sylvia's influencer friend. I clicked on it, my jaw tensing as I read, "Sometimes the strongest women are the ones who suffer in silence. Stay strong, hidden truths." I scrolled through the comments. People were already speculating, some even naming Sylvia. Jocelyn was executing her role effectively, I had to admit. A knock on my classroom door interrupted my thoughts. It was Principal Hawkins. "Gordon, got a minute?" I nodded, gesturing for him to enter. "Of course, sir. What can I do for you?" Hawkins closed the door behind him, his face solemn. "There's been some chatter about you and Sylvia. Is everything okay?" I looked him squarely in the eyes. "Sylvia and I are getting a divorce. It's unfortunate, but these things occur." "That's not all I've heard, Gordon," he continued. I interrupted him. "With all due respect, sir, my personal life is my own concern. I assure you it won't impact my professional duties here." Hawkins observed me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, I'm here." I appreciate that, I responded, effectively closing the conversation. As soon as Hawkins departed, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Frank, it's Gordon Mayo. Remember that favor you owe me?" Frank chuckled. "How could I forget? What do you need?" Teach, I smiled. "I need you to uncover some information on Jocelyn Carter, the social media influencer, and I need it quickly. Consider it done. I'll call you when I have something," he replied. I hung up, my mind teeming with schemes. Sylvia and Jocelyn thought they could ruin me with falsehoods. They were about to receive a harsh lesson in consequences. The next day, I volunteered to chaperone the school dance. As I assisted with setting up decorations, I made sure to converse with the students, inquiring about their lives and aspirations. I knew these interactions would reach their parents, reinforcing the image of the compassionate Mr. Mayo. Emily, one of the students, approached me cautiously. "Mr. Mayo, is it true what they're saying online about you and your wife?" I adopted my most caring teacher demeanor. "Emily, you shouldn't trust everything you read on the internet. Sometimes people say harmful things when they are upset or hurt. The important part is to always treat others with kindness and respect. Don't you agree?" Emily nodded, looking reassured. "Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Mayo." As she walked away, I noticed several other students observing our exchange. Good, the seeds of doubt were being sown. That evening, as I was leaving the school, my phone rang. It was Frank. "Gordon, you're going to want to hear this. Turns out your friend Jocelyn isn't as clean as she pretends. I've got emails showing she's been accepting payments to promote products without disclosing it. Illegal as hell. Oh, and there's more. She's been inflating her follower count, buying fake profiles. Her entire persona is built on lies. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Send me everything you've got, Frank, and make sure it's untraceable. Already done. Check your encrypted email, he confirmed. I thanked him and hung up, a plan already forming in my mind. Jocelyn's campaign against me was gaining ground, but not for long. I had the ammunition I needed to expose her. As I drove home, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they were clever, trying to cast me as the villain. But they had no idea who they were truly dealing with. By the time I was finished, they'd regret ever crossing Gordon Mayo. The fallout was swift and devastating. I leaked the evidence of Jocelyn's fraudulent activities to several trustworthy journalists, and within days the story broke. Her meticulously crafted image collapsed overnight. I was in the teacher's lounge when the news hit. The TV showed Jocelyn's tearful apology video. I never meant to deceive anyone, she sobbed on screen. I got caught up in the pressure of maintaining my image. Turn that trash off, muttered one of my colleagues, reaching for the remote. I stopped him. Wait, I think we should watch this. It's important to stay informed about the influence of social media on our students. As we watched, I noticed the sideways glances from my coworkers. They were putting the pieces together, realizing that Jocelyn was the same person who had been spreading rumors about me. After the broadcast, Sarah, the English teacher, approached me. Gordon, I owe you an apology. I may have believed some of the things I heard about you. I should have known better. I dismissed her apology lightly. No need, Sarah. We all make errors. The important thing is to learn from them, she nodded, looking relieved. You're a good man, Gordon. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As Sarah walked away, I allowed myself a slight smile. The tide was turning. Later that day, as I was leaving school, I spotted a familiar figure storming towards me. Sylvia, her face twisted with fury, yelled, "You scoundrel!" drawing the attention of nearby students and parents. What did you do? How did you get that information about Jocelyn? I stayed composed, mindful of our audience. Sylvia, I think you need to calm down. This is not the right time or place for this conversation. Don't tell me to calm down, she shrieked. You've ruined everything. You were supposed to be crushed, embarrassed. How are you still unaffected? I noticed phones being taken out, capturing the scene. Perfect, Sylvia, I said audibly enough for others to hear. I'm sorry you're experiencing such a tough time, but causing a scene here won't help anyone. Why don't we discuss this privately like adults? Her eyes blazed with anger. You patronizing jerk. You think you're so superior? I'll show you. She lunged at me, her nails scratching across my face. I recoiled, shocked by her sudden assault. Mrs. Mayo, Principal Hawkins' voice boomed across the parking lot. That's enough. As Hawkins approached, I touched my cheek, feeling the sting from her scratches. Sylvia stood, breathing heavily, seemingly realizing what she had done. I didn't mean save it. Hawkins interrupted her. Mr. Mayo, are you all right? Do you want to press charges? I shook my head, adopting the role of the magnanimous victim. No, that won't be necessary. I'm sure Sylvia is just distressed. Perhaps she needs support, not punishment. Sylvia's face contorted with a mix of rage and despair as Hawkins escorted her away. I could feel the sympathy from the onlookers. They had witnessed the whole ordeal, the unhinged woman attacking the composed, forgiving teacher. That night, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Alejandro. Gordon, his voice tense. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied calmly. This has gone too far. My clients are leaving. My reputation is in ruins. Call off your actions, Gordon. What do you want? I laughed without mirth. What do I want? I want you to understand the repercussions of your actions, Alejandro. You thought you could take my wife, ruin my life, and remain unharmed. You're learning a harsh lesson about karma. Please, he pleaded, his usual confidence gone. I'll do anything. Just make it stop, all right. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to publicly confess to your affair with Sylvia. You're going to tell everyone how you exploited her, used her, and then you're going to leave town for good. There was a long pause. And if I do this, you'll stop. You have my word, I said, fully aware that my campaign against him was already self-sustaining. The community would handle the rest. Fine, he agreed, defeat in his voice. I'll do it. As I hung up, a wave of satisfaction swept over me. Sylvia and Alejandro had tried to ruin me, to cast me as the villain. Instead, they had engineered their own downfall. The next day, Alejandro's confession appeared on social media. The backlash was immediate and severe. His business, already faltering, failed completely. Sylvia, now revealed as a willing participant in the affair, found herself ostracized by the very community she had tried to turn against me. I watched everything unfold from afar, playing the role of the dignified, wronged husband. The sympathy and support I received were overwhelming. Those who had once viewed me with suspicion now treated me with respect and admiration. As I stood in front of my class, discussing the complexities of human nature and literature, I couldn't help but savor the irony. Sylvia and Alejandro had underestimated me, seeing only the mild-mannered teacher. They never realized that I could outplay them at their own game. I thought I'd seen the last of Alejandro, but like a persistent nuisance, he reappeared, this time targeting my career, which I had built over 2 decades. The first sign of trouble came when Principal Hawkins called me into his office one morning. His expression was serious. "Gordon, we need to talk," he said, his tone grave. "There have been some serious allegations made against you." I leaned forward, my face expressionless. "What kind of allegations?" Hawkins sighed, sliding a folder across the desk. "Misconduct, Gordon. Serious stuff. A colleague and several students have come forward with complaints." I opened the folder, scanning the contents. My blood boiled as I read the fabricated stories, the exaggerated tales of minor classroom incidents twisted into something sinister. "This is nonsense," I declared, shutting the folder. "Who's behind this? The board is taking it seriously, Gordon." "I'm sorry, but effective immediately. You're suspended pending an investigation." I stood up, my mind whirling. "This is Alejandro's doing, isn't it? He's manipulating people, trying to ruin me." Hawkins shook his head. "I can't discuss the details. Please, Gordon, just go home. We'll be in touch." As I left the office, I saw Jared Livingston, a younger teacher with whom I'd never been particularly close. He avoided my gaze, hurrying past. That's when I realized he was involved. I spent the next few days at home, fielding calls from concerned colleagues and friends. The news had spread quickly, and I could feel public opinion shifting against me. Then, unexpectedly, I received a visit from Marshall J.N., a veteran teacher, and one of the few people I considered a true friend. "Gordon," he said as I opened the door, "we need to talk." I ushered him in, and we sat in my living room. Marshall looked troubled, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something more serious. "I know you didn't do what they're saying," he began, "and I think I have proof." My eyebrows rose. What kind of proof? Marshall pulled out his phone. "I overheard Jared talking to someone the other day. He sounded scared, like he was being coerced into something." He played the recording. Jared's voice was clear. "I can't do this anymore. It's not right. Gordon's never done anything wrong." "No, you don't understand. He's threatening me, saying he'll expose." "Look, I don't care about the money anymore. This has gone too far." I leaned back, a smile on my face. "Alejandro, it has to be him." Marshall nodded. "That's what I figured. What are you going to do?" I stood, my resolve strengthening. "I'm going to end this, once and for all. Can you get me a meeting with the school board?" Marshall grinned. "Consider it done." The next day I stood before the school board, Marshall by my side. I played the recording, watching as their expressions changed from skepticism to shock. "Mr. Mayo," the board president said, after a long silence, "we owe you an apology. It's clear you've been the victim of a malicious campaign." I nodded, my voice steady. "I appreciate that, but I think we need to address the root of the problem. Alejandro Mir has been orchestrating this smear campaign. He manipulated Jared and those students. I believe he should be held accountable." The board members exchanged glances. "We'll look into it, Mr. Mayo. For now, consider your suspension lifted. We'll issue a public apology and clear your name." As we left the meeting, Marshall clapped me on the back. "You did it, Gordon. Alejandro's finished." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Not quite yet, but he will be true to their word." The school board issued a public apology. The community rallied around me, outraged at how I'd been treated. Alejandro, his last desperate attempt to destroy me having spectacularly backfired, went to ground. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Alejandro had tried to take everything from me. Now, I would return the favor. Despite my victory at the school, I still had one last battle to face: the divorce court. Sylvia, emboldened by the state's no-fault divorce laws, swaggered into the courtroom as if she owned it. As the judge read out the settlement, I kept my face impassive. Sylvia, on the other hand, couldn't hide her glee. Mr. Mayo, the judge declared, as per the state laws, your wife is entitled to half of your joint assets. This includes your savings, pension, and property. Sylvia leaned over, her voice a venomous whisper. Hear that, Gordon? I win. After all, I said nothing, merely nodding at the judge's words. Inside, however, my mind was already several steps ahead. As we left the courthouse, Sylvia couldn't resist one last jab. She strutted down the steps, her newly acquired wealth practically radiating from her. Oh, Gordon, she called back, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. Don't look so down, at least you still have your teaching job. Though I can't imagine the salary will cover much more than a modest little apartment. Now I watched her leave, my face expressionless. Alejandro stood at the bottom of the steps, looking uneasy. He kept his distance throughout the proceedings, no doubt aware of how unstable his own situation was. Sylvia reached him, linking her arm through his. Come on, darling, let's go celebrate my new fortune. Alejandro hesitated, glancing up at me. I met his gaze coolly, and he quickly looked away. Actually, Sylvia, I have a meeting, maybe another time. Sylvia's face dropped, but she quickly recovered. Fine, more for me then. As they walked away, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Martin, it's Gordon. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. Martin Maynard, a smooth-talking con artist I once helped out of a bind, chuckled on the other end of the line. Well, the straight-laced teacher finally needs my particular set of skills. What's the plan? Gordon, I outlined my strategy as I watched Sylvia climb into a taxi, likely headed for the nearest high-end boutique. Can you do it? I asked. For you, Gordon, consider it done. Sylvia won't know what hit her. Over the next few weeks, I observed from a distance as Martin worked his charm. He approached Sylvia at her favorite upscale bar, playing the part of a successful businessman perfectly. I sat at the other end of the bar, nursing a drink as Martin regaled Sylvia with tales of exclusive investment opportunities and promises of quick riches. You see, my dear, Martin was saying, his charm dialed up to 11. These opportunities are usually reserved for the upper crust of society, but I see something special in you. A woman of your caliber deserves to be among the elite. Sylvia preened under his attention. Well, I always knew I was destined for greater things. My ex-husband could never understand that. Martin leaned in conspiratorially. Ah, yes, narrow-minded men often fail to appreciate true potential. But you, Sylvia, you have a talent. I can help you turn that settlement into wealth that will make your ex-husband's head spin. I concealed my grin behind my glass. Sylvia was completely hooked. Over the following months, Martin gradually introduced Sylvia to higher-risk ventures. I kept tabs on her through my network, watching as she immersed herself in this new world of supposed luxury and exclusivity. One evening, I received a call from Martin. Gordon, my friend, I think it's time for the grand finale. Our dear Sylvia has developed quite the taste for high-stakes gambling. What do you say we introduce her to a game she can't possibly win? I paused for a moment, then steeled myself. Do it. The next week, I stood outside a high-end casino, watching as Sylvia entered, dressed extravagantly. Martin had set up a private game, promising unimaginable riches to the winner. Hours later, Sylvia stumbled out, her face ashen. I stepped out of the shadows, startling her. Gordon, what? What are you doing here? I shrugged, feigning indifference. Just out for a walk. You look upset, Sylvia. Rough night. She glared at me, her earlier bravado gone. This doesn't concern you. I'm fine, I nodded, my tone neutral. Of course, well, good night then. As I walked away, I heard her burst into tears, but I didn't look back. Sylvia had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. The fallout from Sylvia's gambling habit was swift and brutal. Within months, she had lost everything: the divorce settlement, her social standing, even her designer clothes. I heard through the grapevine that she'd been forced to sell her prized possessions just to cover her basic expenses. Her once vibrant social life had evaporated, fair-weather friends abandoning her as quickly as her money had. One day, I ran into Sarah, the English teacher, at the local coffee shop. Gordon, she said, her voice low, did you hear about Sylvia? They say she's living in a rundown apartment on the edge of town. Can you believe it? I shook my head, maintaining a neutral expression. Life can change quickly, Sarah. It's a shame. Sarah nodded sympathetically. You're a better person than I am, Gordon. After everything she put you through, I don't know if I could be so forgiving. As I left the coffee shop, I allowed myself a small smile. Forgiving? No, But satisfied? Absolutely. Weeks passed, and life found a new rhythm. My standing at the school had never been stronger, with both students and parents extolling my virtues. The community, having seen my resilience during adversity, supported me ardently. One sunny Saturday while I was gardening, I noticed someone approaching my house. As they came closer, I recognized Melody, the compassionate librarian I had grown close to recently. "Gordon," she called out, waving. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. "Not at all, Melody. What brings you here?" She held up a book. "I found that novel you were looking for and thought I'd drop it off." I invited her in, and we spent the afternoon discussing books, life, and everything in between. As the sun began to set, Melody got ready to leave. "This was lovely, Gordon," she said, her smile warm. "We should do this again sometime." I nodded, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years. "I'd like that." As I watched her leave, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I was looking forward to what the future might bring. The next day, I decided to finish a project I'd been working on for weeks, a beautifully crafted wooden box. As I applied the final coat of varnish, I reflected on the past year, Sylvia's betrayal, Alejandro's plots, the struggles I had overcome. It had been a long, challenging journey, but I had emerged stronger. Once the varnish had dried, I went to my desk and pulled out an envelope containing a letter from Sylvia sent months ago, filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I'd never opened it. I placed the letter in the box, closed the lid, locked it, and then went outside to the backyard. I dug a small hole and buried the box. As I patted down the earth, a sense of closure washed over me. The past was now where it belonged, buried and forgotten. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked out over my garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. In that moment, I felt truly liberated. Sylvia, Alejandro, the pain and betrayal they had caused, all of it was behind me now. I had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. As I walked back into my house, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me was not the same one who had discovered that damning receipt all those months ago. This man was stronger, wiser, and unafraid of whatever challenges life might throw his way. I smiled at my reflection, then turned away, eager and ready for whatever the future held. This is where our story ends. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure to subscribe to this channel. It would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you there.